Apparently also the subject of a DOI investigation, so I really can't explain my vote at this time, but I did what I thought was appropriate under the circumstances.
A week before election, how should the electorate feel about next Tuesday?
Our election will go off and it will be it'll be done appropriately and properly, and the machines will be there. As I mentioned earlier today, the machines have already left, and some of the machines have already left the warehouses, the scanners, and the company information and all the stuff. We have the ability to get it out in a normal way this time. We did not at the primary. That was something that wasn't really discussed, but because of the testing and everything else, everything was sent out late. We're now up to speed. All the machines and the scanners are sealed, at least in New York County and most of the other boroughs. I believe all the other boroughs, but I don't know for a fact. And we expect to have the poll sites open on the appropriate day. We've done the best we can to get everybody trained or retrained to the extent that that's necessary. And we hope to have a good election. And from my standpoint, I hope there's a good election, and I'm confident that we'll have one.
Commissioner, how did you vote? Did you vote to fire George Gonzalez? Can you tell us why?
I did vote to affirmatively on that motion. However, I really can't get into why. It's a personnel matter. I've known George for a long time, and I feel very sorry that this sort of happened the way it happened, but it's also the subject of a pending DOI investigation, and I really can't comment on that.
You can't say why, but is it safe to say that since everything else had been, I guess, talked about before, the DOI investigation was the last straw?
I really can't say. I'm sorry.
What's your name, sir? Sorry.
I'm Frederick Umane. I'm the Manhattan Republican Commissioner.
How much of an impact did the primary elections have on your decision? There was a lot of complaints about election polls not being open, the machines not working, the actual layout of the ballot.
I've sort of answered that question by not answering it, and as I say, I feel very badly about this whole set of circumstances, but I really can't comment on my vote. My vote is what it was. I voted in favor of the motion to terminate George Gonzalez, but I really can't get into the reasons.
And who put forward the motion at this meeting?
I don't remember, but it happened, and we just have to move on. And I think we'll all be ready on Tuesday morning, and we'll have a good election. And that's really what the story should be. That we're gonna get it right this time, and hopefully all of the stories and the reports won't be written the day before, that they'll wait to do it the day after, or at least the day of, to make sure that everything is accurately and appropriately reported. With the additional help from the police, which Commissioner Ryan mentioned, being available earlier, that will relieve an additional burden that we had. And I can't tell you that 100% of the poll sites will open, because somebody in the city of New York always oversleeps. But the machines will have been delivered and will be ready to go. Now, put an asterisk on that. If the court somehow decides this afternoon that we have to change the ballot, then all bets are off. And I really think that we would have a significant problem and would not be able to put on an election with revised ballots on scanners. If we had to at that point, then I bet we would have an election, but probably it would be counted by hand.
I know you talked about it there, but what is the issue with the potentially redoing the ballot? Can you explain that?
There is an elaborate testing procedure. So first, all the ballots throughout the state, and I'm only worried about the city of New York, would have to be reprinted.
If they fail
there are 1,500 ballots for each election district. That would have to be reprinted. They would have to individually, test decks would each have to be individually randomly marked and run through the scanners. And that was the issue that really put us behind the 8 ball for the primary, because the testing, which we thought would take an hour, actually took between 8, 10, and 12 hours per scanner. So that delayed our ability to do the testing and get the scanners out to the poll sites, and for that reason, poll sites open late. As I already said, we're up to speed, we're where we should be. The machines, as we speak, are being delivered all over the city of New York. We have today, tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day. For the primary, we had, in many respects, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday morning to deliver those scanners. That's the primary reason, no pun intended, why the poll sites open late, because of the delay in the testing of the scanners. And I might remind you that this was the first time that we had had a election with those, and even the tests that were done throughout the state did not deal with issues such as we have in New York with the rotation of the ballot, which required enormous test decks to be run. So each ED had a separate and different ballot that had to be run through the scanners. And I think each test deck had 400 or 450 ballots. Somebody had to make those ballots and then run them through. And if you had a poll site that had 10, 12 election districts, each one of those had to run through each of the scanners for each of those poll sites. And that's what was the primary cause for the delay. And we don't have that now. The machines are ready, they're being delivered, and that's why we expect that the poll sites will open on time, particularly with the help of the police, and we'll have a good election.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Umane, for us who weren't here when you started, can you in any way tell us why it was necessary to fire Mr. Gonzalez at this time, a week before the election?
Sorry, it's really a personnel matter, and really can't comment on that. I will say, and it was announced that I was one of the people who voted in favor of termination. I did it with great trepidation because I've been here longer than any of the other commissioners. I've worked with Mr. Gonzalez for many years, and it was personally a very difficult decision. But I voted the way I voted. I really can't comment on why, or because it's a personnel matter and we don't discuss personnel matters, and it's also the subject of a DOI investigation, so I'm not really able to discuss it.
Can you talk a little bit more generically, though, about why you think there needs to be new leadership?
I didn't say that there needed to be new leadership. I said that I voted to terminate Mr. Gonzalez. I'm not trying to be a wise guy. I think that the current people will be able to carry out the election, and I think at this point, while the timing of this is certainly not the best, the heavy lifting at this point in time is in the borough offices, where the actual on the ground, getting the machines ready, and they all are, and getting the ballots and all the voting paraphernalia necessary to be delivered, and that's really where we that's really in the boroughs now.
Given that the board itself as a whole has been under fire and accused of all these various problems, or at least blamed for all of these problems, and now one individual has been fired. The assumption that we have, the only assumption we can make is that he was the one to blame.
I'm not blaming anybody. That's the job of other people to do. I just feel sorry on a personal level for Mr. Gonzalez, but I felt constrained to vote the way I did today. Thanks very much. And
Thanks.